logistics is never about just a transport function.
Moving shipments, you have thousands of companies that can do this.
What are the hidden steps behind those shipments?
You reach to a position where you find the solution before the customer asks for it.
Why is road freight always the backup plan?
This is where they realize the importance of logistics. And this is where they realize the importance of the partners they work with.
How do logistics companies decide this is the best route to go through?
I reverse engineer it basically. I want this amount by this time.
The run out.
What can we do to achieve this with the challenges you're facing? And we make sure that we always have a buffer.
Cheapest against best solution, or reliability that has a cost impact?
That's a tricky question. So when it's ready on ground, when it's ready to be shipped, the documentation part, Shady, you cannot imagine how tough this part is.
But do you think logistics companies are actually putting the right amount of effort into developing their own ways or methodology of operations?
I'm managing a company. I cannot go to the finance team and say, listen, no matter what happens, you need to move these goods. It doesn't work this way, because if I do not look into cost, I'm dead.
So it's basically a discussion between the customer and the service provider.
Of course.
Christian, when logistics is working fine and everything is great, it basically is seamless and no one realizes it even exists as a function. However, when it is disrupted, people start screaming supply chain. And you're a classic example because we know each other over a decade now. And you're one of the people who turned with our business relation as customer and vendor, basically, into friends. And you worked over 20 years in one of the global companies handling road freight. So you were the best person that I can bring on board to talk us through this kind of disruption. So today's episode, without going into too much detail right at the beginning, but it's going to be about the supply chain, logistics, disruption, and how we actually look at this, and with the main headline, the Strait of Hormuz, basically. So we'll be diving in all these topics. But Christian, pleasure to have you on board.
Shady, same here. I'm happy that we're finally meeting. I've watched a lot of your podcasts. You were busy, I was busy, and we said, you know what? When we spoke, let's do it. So thank you so much. I'm very happy that I'm here. And I congratulate you for this great thing that you're doing, because I think it's very important for an expert like yourself to have something like that. You're not a person that doesn't have the expertise. You have the expertise on ground. You know what you're doing. And as you said, you're a great friend. From a customer to a vendor, we became friends. So thank you for inviting me today. And I'm sure this episode will be great.
Thanks a lot, Chris. But let's jump into the main headline. Now, Chris, in your experience of 25 years plus, and as I mentioned, you've worked in the global entities within the logistics. And as we mentioned earlier, when everything is working fine, no one realizes logistics even as a department. Now with what's going on, and when we talk about what kind of disruptions the world, like in the past there was COVID, then at the meantime the logistics challenges between different routes, and within your experience, and you've worked on that global level of road transportation, handling the road transportation within the region specifically. Now, oil and gas and various goods, FMCGs, for example, and the automotive part, usually people would feel that at the end of the cycle. What do you think of this? I mean, with these kinds of disruptions?
So logistics in general is a sector that, like you've mentioned, that no one focuses about it until something happens. And COVID was a very
Classic example.
Exactly, and it was the beginning. And what we're having now, and hopefully it will end soon. But this is where you feel and you understand the impact of logistics and supply chain. That when such disruptions happen, the agility that needs to be there, and what differentiates a company from another, does a lot and changes a lot positively. So, if we speak about what's going on these days, and we'll focus on the road transport. So when we had all the disruptions at the Strait of Hormuz, land freight was the only thing that could make everyone's life easier.
It was the backup plan, basically.
It was the backup plan. Land freight was always there. You know, Shady, that this part of the region, road freight is a very important product within the GCC. But then when this happened, it showed a lot how valuable this product is. What are the gaps that I'm sure lots of governments will look into it later on, after we pass these tough days, and it will change a lot. What was prior this current disruption is something, and whatever will come after that is a totally different thing, in terms of how the customer will look at it by not depending on one way to import goods, but to have several options, not because something will happen, but to have different scenarios. Okay, if I have a problem today with the shipping lines, what can we do and how road freight can help? Do I need... People were not ever thinking about importing stuff from Europe to here by land freight. It was always there. But when this happened, people were focusing more, governments were focusing more on finding corridors and to try to facilitate this. And the UAE was one of these countries. There were leaders in trying to find solutions and to try to make everyone's life as easy as possible when air freight and ocean freight was not there.
Now, Chris, I'm a bit curious because I love how you rephrased even the answer. Because I got to ask you, how did it all start? How did you start in the logistics sector even? And what got you in it? Because the way you even phrased the answer, it was from the business perspective into even how people manage their business accordingly. But I'd love to hear from you, of course.
Okay, so it all began by coincidence. I was never, to be very frank, I never thought what I wanted to study or to work. Usually people, they ask you, okay, what do you want to do after high school? I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor. I never knew what I wanted to do. The classic way. Now, as you know, we both come from Egypt, and it's not the norm that we work during universities, not like other countries. However, I had a great chance, and I was very lucky to have this opportunity to work at the end of the first year at university. I had the chance to work in one of the global companies, and it all began as a trainee. Then I would say it became more addictive, and I loved the logistics, and I loved the freight forwarding. And I was lucky as well to work in a sector that depends a lot on this, which is the oil and gas. And maybe when disruption happens, I was dynamic enough to understand how to try to overcome gaps and challenges, because oil and gas is all about this. You cannot have a rig that is down for 24 hours. This costs $150,000 to $200,000 a day.
Wow.
So it's not something that you can just take it easy and say, okay, if the shipment doesn't arrive today and it arrives in 2 days, that's fine. No, it's not fine. So being in the working in logistics, focusing on the oil and gas customers, this is where I began. And this is where I really loved it. I loved the fact that you need to be dynamic. You need to always think about out-of-the-box solutions. Okay, and again, this is very important in such sector, is to always think out of the box. And I spent my first 4 years from the second year of university till 1 year after just focusing on oil and gas. It was fun. It was extremely interesting. I learned a lot from it. I became, my mindset became very dynamic, and how to always look into solutions and continuous improvements. And this is where it all began. And I'm here after 25 years doing logistics, freight forwarding, trucking, supply chain, and I enjoy it.
So it wasn't basically the moving the shipments part, but rather the managing the business impact.
Correct. Exactly. Wow. Because moving shipments, you have thousands of companies that can do this. But to manage the needs of the customer and to be agile enough to think, okay, you reach to a position where you find the solution before the customer asks for it. Because you can foresee a challenge coming. You can foresee that, okay, because of this tough period of time, there is a strike in an airport, okay, in Europe. How can you still deliver the shipment on time? The strike is there. Then you begin thinking from the second the customer asks you for a shipment for 2-3 solutions. If this airport doesn't work, I will ship from this airport. Okay, but how long does it take the trucking from this country to this country? And how much is the cost? Okay, in that situation, cost is not an issue. Finding a solution is the key word. So such environment I was in at work helped me a lot and made me what I am today. And I'm very grateful. I'm very lucky to be in this sector, especially these days.
I can't help but I'll dig deeper into what you just said, because normally customers, and I would take a classic example or a usual example within the automotive, like spare parts. Customer will only look at if the spare part is available or not, or if he's ordered the car or he's taking delivery, did it arrive on time and did he take the delivery on time or not? That's it. But that will take me to the common sense question. I need to know, or at least whoever is listening to us, like the audience normally, is what are the hidden steps behind those shipments? What are the main things that were challenges that you had to break through in order to get those spare parts or that car or whatever the shipment is to the end customer on time? Because there is documentation, there is if the spare part is available, even at the factory level, the chain behind the supply chain there, and getting it through the route, and if you're going to change the route along the way, there is a lot of stuff. So that's basically where I'm going with this.
So when you're ordering a part, it's what happens. The whole route is like you've mentioned. So when will it be ready at factory, and when is it ready to be shipped? So when it's ready on ground, when it's ready to be shipped, the documentation part, Shady, you cannot imagine how tough this part is, okay? The approvals that you need to get when you import a shipment, each and every country has its own approvals. They have their own way of applying for these approvals. Okay, so it's not only about shipping. So you can get the shipment ASAP, but it gets stuck at the customs for 15 days. Because you don't know this kind of part with this HS codes. These HS codes are they regulated? Do they need these approvals? And this is where as I mentioned earlier, thinking out of the box. You don't say, okay, because the customer doesn't know how to clear the shipment, I will not help him. Because at the end of the day, it's impacting his needs, and it's impacting me as a service provider to this customer on saying, you know what, Chris' company is like any other company. If the solution is not there, they will not help, or they will not give me the advice. No, at the end of the day, we are selling a service. We are consultants to customers. It's not just that we're a service provider moving from point A to point B. And really, in logistics, if you think this way, this is where you get differentiated between a person that understands customers' needs and someone who doesn't know it.
It's basically you're maintaining the agility and integrity in delivering that service.
Correct.
And whenever there are disruptions, you're making sure that it's still delivered within that same
Correct.
manner.
Yes.
Am I right?
In a compliant way.
Exactly.
And this is very important because there are always means to do this in a non-compliant way. However, again, if a customer approaches me to do something with a document that I don't feel is right, I don't tell him, by the way, this will not impact me. Your name is on the document. My name is not on the document. Okay? So it's important to do things fast and compliant, and as much as we can to look into the cost, because we know when you understand how logistics, what's the impact of logistics in the business, like what's happening today and how the cost of diesel increased, all these routes. When you're moving a truck that's supposed to come to Jabal Ali, now you need to move it from Salalah or Sohar or from Jeddah. How this cost is impacting the final amount that this part or this medicine or this equipment is being sold. And I would like as well to highlight that there is I would say a cause behind our business. I cannot always take advantage of such stuff, and I make sure, and when we speak to salespeople, guys, don't take advantage of what's going on today. That's not right. Okay, yes, we know that there is the cost increased. We know that the diesel. I'm not saying that we'll work at loss. However, we need to still keep in mind, I will go and still buy a spare part for my car, correct? So if I'm trying to increase the freight and try to make more money, I know that this will impact someone. So we need to think about this, and this goes beyond the business.
But why does the customer, Chris, realize the importance of such logistics function? Why does the customer only realize its importance when there is something going wrong?
Because the normal way of doing stuff is not there anymore. If a customer in Kuwait was always shipping from, I would say, China to Kuwait, it used to take a transit time of, let's say, 25 days or 23 days, and now this stopped, and you cannot enter the Kuwaiti ports, Shuwaikh port. This is where they realize the importance of logistics. And this is where they realize the importance of the partners they work with. And that's a very important point, because it's not only about understanding the logistics, so are the partners that are doing the job for you. Because when everything is good, they will look only at cost. But now, when I wouldn't say cost is not important, of course cost is important, but how reliable the partner you're working with is, that has solutions, that has presence in different countries, that can help you with overcoming your challenge. And this is where they feel that, okay, this is the importance of logistics. How I couldn't see that, okay, I was taking things for granted. A container will come in 22, 23 days. Now when a container comes in 40 and 50 days, I say, wow. So just a strait that was closed or that was temporarily closed or disrupted has an impact of double the transit time. Wow. And then this is where you have a ripple effect. The transit time, the cost, reaching the end user, focusing on the market share, all this is driven by logistics.
But then that means, again, because that relates to disruption directly, strategically, when a route is being blocked for some reason and already the shipment is on its way or about to take off on its route, how do you handle these challenges? I mean, you've mentioned, of course, some of it now when we are talking, but that will require a change in documentation. It will require a change in route, sometimes even change in the freight line itself.
Correct.
How do you handle these kinds of challenges? And of course, it is related that the shipper or the logistics company knows exactly what it is doing.
Correct. Like you've mentioned, I had a very classic example that happened a couple of days ago. So there were containers that were moving out from Kizad port. They left 2 days before whatever happened, and then the vessel did not move out for 2.5 months, and they returned the container back to Abu Dhabi.
Wow.
They have done, and again, it was very complicated because it went on temporary export, and temporary export by ocean freight is not like temporary export by road freight. And this is where we came up and we said, okay, these are the steps that we need to do. These are the NOCs that we need to get from customs authorities, from shipping lines, and to come up with a solution that sorts out the challenge in a fast way, because he already lost 2 months without delivering his goods. Okay, and it went for temporary export to get repaired and come back. So this means that this is something, it's an important equipment that needs to be there. And this is where we came up with different solutions. So we basically took the goods, sent it to one of the Omani ports, and it went. The whole thing took, I would say, 7 days. Okay. 2 months without moving, and we finished everything in 7 days out. Now, it will still take extra time, but this is not something that I can manage. I'm managing the part as fast as I can that I can control.
But there is then the fuel cost, there is the change of documentation, and I think that is where the orchestrating of everything comes in place.
Yes, correct. This was an extra cost that was there. Trucking these days, I would say, increased by 3-4 times what was there earlier. And again, people did not realize this. They realized this when, because you have an issue with supply in the market, this is where the prices increased.
And not only that, the cross borders freight, and you and I know that there is a lot of challenges also related to the cross borders traveling. We need to look at the drivers, you need to look at the trucks, you need to look at even the superstructure around it, the trailers, etc. and etc. I mean, moving around with the refrigerated trucks, okay, what kind of temperature it needs to be maintained at, all these things, right?
And plus the challenges that you're facing at the borders. So with all these trucks, so you had trucks that were focusing only on domestic, and now they need to move cross-border because you have an issue with ocean freight, and this created a sort of a bottleneck at the borders, how to make sure that everything is done correctly, and you're achieving, like if you're moving in a refrigerated shipment, okay, we need to make sure that I'm maintaining the 2 to 8 degrees no matter what happens. I cannot tell the customer because I spent 5 days at the borders, I have an issue with my reefer. And you cannot let your truck stop. So my truck comes back, goes for maintenance, and off you go. I put another driver, and it goes. We don't stop. And this what shows the importance of road freight and trucking in this part of the region. And I'm telling you, this will change a lot. The mindsets after when everything gets sorted out, hopefully very soon, people will look into road freight in a totally different way.
That is actually my next question, because it is related to the importance of road freight, and it has always been the backup plan for moving goods around us. Whenever things get heated in various ports, even around the region, and today this is a classic example, road freight came in the picture as the strongest and the most reliable current fast solution. Why is road freight always the backup plan?
So we basically have 3 main products in logistics to move goods. You have the air freight, the ocean freight, and the road freight. Air freight, when everything is normal, you move from an airport to another airport. Ocean freight, you move from a port to another port. Road freight, in the normal days, you move from point A to point B. But then when disruptions happen and there are things that are out of the control of the air freight and the ocean freight product, this is where road freight is the correct backbone to sort these challenges and to make sure that we don't have problems. So if I'm having a problem at an airport, in one of the airports, you cannot deliver anymore. If you cannot have flights, or they only depend on passenger flights, only passenger flights can go to the airport, you cannot deliver freight, I can still get it to the closest airport and then do an in-transit clearance, move it by truck to that airport that cannot accept freight. Same thing goes for ocean freight. I can get it to the closest port, send my truck, collect the goods from the port, and deliver it to another port. If I need to move something from the US to China, I can still go through Jeddah port, deliver the truck to Fujairah, Khurfakan, Salalah, and then continue doing the movement to Asia, rather than taking a transit time of 60 days from the Hope of Cape. So trucking is a very important part of the supply chain when it comes to normal days and disrupted days. Because we still continue, we're the superstars. We're always on the road, no matter what happens.
I love how you described it as the backbone. So when do companies actually decide where to position the road transport? So yeah, you've mentioned it's always there, and I believe so, of course. But then when times are getting tougher to move goods around, how do logistics companies decide this is the best route to go through?
It depends on a couple of factors. One, the commodities that you're moving. Two, the transit time. And three, the cost. Okay. So if I need to get, a company that works in the FMCG industry, okay, and food, they have the essential goods that are food, we need to make sure that they are delivered no matter what happens. So this is where we come up with solutions with customers. As I mentioned earlier, it's okay, the customer can have an idea on how to, can we get it from this port by truck to this other port to re-export it? Who executes this and comes up with solutions are the service providers. A customer can have an idea.
Allow me to interrupt you there. Sorry to interrupt, but so it's basically a discussion between the customer and the service provider.
Of course. And I would like to say, I don't like the word, okay, I've mentioned service provider. This is where we call ourselves partners. Because a partner will always come up with a solution, putting himself in different shoes, in the shoes of the customer, the shoes of the end user. So I like to position always such companies as us,
as
or
partners.
as people working in this industry as partners. You need to understand that, okay, if I suggest a very high cost, how will this impact them to sell? And if they're able to sell, how will it impact the end user? Same thing for the transit time. I can maybe find a normal solution that takes 20 days. But if I'm delivering medicines for a pharma company, so the transit time is a very important thing. So you need to always juggle and think out loud, you and your customer, on how to come up with solutions that are cost effective, time effective, and make sure that at the end of the day, you deliver what needs to be delivered.
I gotta admire the way you phrased it in terms of being partners, because I do believe that as well. And of course, you're spot on. However, it's always around the business impact, as you've mentioned from the beginning. So you actually have an eye on the buffering of the customer's stock, for example, and even the cost. And you even advise your partners in business on the best routes, on even how to get them as quick as possible on shelf.
Correct.
Or like in automotive, not just on shelf, but even on the ground. Correct. At the customer location.
Yes, of course. So if a customer will come and tell me, okay, my replenishment plan is every 3 months in normal days. Nowadays, you cannot achieve these 3 months. Okay, so we will make sure that he will come and tell me, I will not get involved in the stocks or the orders he's putting, but I'm part of, and this is one of the very important questions I ask. Okay, so from these couple of SKUs, how much do you want? I reverse engineer it basically. Okay, I want this amount by this time.
The run out.
Exactly. What can we do to achieve this with the challenges you're facing? And we make sure that we always have a buffer, because you cannot guarantee anything. Okay, with whenever a disruption happen, you come and give the customer 2 or 3 different scenarios and tell him, okay, these are the different routes that we can have. This is the different cost that I can provide. And again, this is where a partner comes out. You put yourself in your customer's shoes and give him options. You don't just say, okay, this is the only option we have. It's an ongoing thing, and we need to always think that when I'm dealing with a customer, I always give them solutions and not try to stop and say, okay, this is the best I can offer you. And this is what logistics taught me, is always, we're not selling anything tangible. We're selling a service. And a service is about finding solutions, is about making sure that the requirements and the needs of the customers are as much as I can help in achieving them.
I'm gonna try and rephrase my next question in a nice way. However, it's like in a bit of a devilish style. Cheapest against best solution, or reliability that has a cost impact?
That's a tricky question.
I told you I'll try to rephrase it, but I know where I'm going with this.
And I will answer you in a very honest way. It depends on what you're moving. Okay, so if let's say we're moving steel structure, I understand that this kind of business, each and every penny has an impact on the total cost, because these goods are more volumetric than costly. Okay, mm-hmm. But when you're moving medicines or you're moving high value goods, or you're moving something that needs to reach in a certain amount of time, this is where cost is not an issue anymore. However, I'm not in favor of taking advantage of such situations. I've told you before, we work for a causes, okay, and especially for essential goods. So yes, maybe I'm paying the driver a bit more because of what's going on and whatever risk he can take, or the cost of diesel increased. I will still try to be logical in the offer that I'm making to my customers. So to answer your question, it's a mix of these 2 options, but it all depends on the type of goods that you're moving.
So it's always a very relatable or debatable subject, and even what kind of solution you're going to propose and the mix of it in order to make it cost effective with the best service solution or service level that you can provide.
Correct. And it depends on the sector that you're targeting. And this is why I always focus on having a diversification of customers within the business. So when you're a transport service provider, you don't go and say, I will work only with 3PLs, or I will work only with end customers. And these end customers, I want to work only with FMCG because I make money out of FMCG. No, the diversification of customers in the business is a very important thing. Because you make sure that if something happens in this sector, you're always covered with another sector. If this sector needs your support, you are there for them. So the diversification and the type of customers is as well very important.
The next topic is basically about the future of supply chain and logistics, and that will take us usually to the visibility and the AI part. And when we talk about these, I believe that for any future to be sustainable, it has to get out of the reactive part or reactive zone into being proactive. And I think visibility is one major part within that. How do you see that future within the logistics and supply chain?
I mean, visibility became the norm now, okay? So any vessel, you can always track it. Any flight, you can always track it. Any truck, you can track it with the GPS. So this became the norm. Now, where I think the future is maybe in such, whenever a customer wants to decide on which route to use or which type of product within logistics to use, air freight, ocean freight, or trucking, this is where technology and AI could help in putting these scenarios as accurate as possible and help the customer to take such decisions. If I want to ship something from the UAE to KSA, I will put some input, say, okay, I need to reach before end of the month, okay, because I want to do my revenue recognition. However, I know that the rate is high at the end of the month because the demand is more. What can I do to achieve this? This is where AI and technology will help and support the human decision in it. Visibility is normal now. We need to go beyond visibility. Put all these different scenarios in place. Have these different options and not just focus on one option.
But do you think that, and I agree with you, of course, regarding the visibility, but do you think companies or logistics companies are actually putting the right amount of effort into developing their own ways or methodology of operations? Or there is still a lot of room for improvement, especially in technology?
There is a lot of room for improvement. Like you said, you've mentioned something really good, which is the reactive and the proactive decisions that are taking. Most of the companies are always working reactively. Okay, so a couple of years ago, people didn't care of putting GPS on the trucks. But now, understanding the behavior of the driver, especially with asset owners, understanding the behavior of driving and understanding what are the best routes to take. So you need to have the GPS not only to track your truck, but to have inputs that could help you with managing your day-to-day operations with a transport management system and your asset with a fleet management system. It's not about just tracking only, okay? If I know that I have 10 trucks in my fleet, but I have only 8 trucks that are doing this route back and forth, and 2 trucks are doing a short distance. So I know that at the end of the day, I will have that much of kilometers are put on this truck, and that much of kilometers are put on these 2 trucks. How can I juggle these things? This is where technology can help a lot. And this is where companies will need to look into that. And customers need to push for this. It's very important that customers push for this.
There is one part, I've worked in that area for a while, and there was a lot of work that could have been done that I've seen that maybe leaders in logistics have not put enough effort in, which is regarding the productivity and asset management and utilizing their control towers in the best way. And when I say control towers, I mean the people who are taking the decisions at the back, in their back offices, and looking at the routes, as you mentioned, and even mixing the routes to make sense in terms of profitability of each route. And like, they can work on a specific route for so long, but then they would just wake up one day and say, we are not making enough money. Yeah, because you're not having the mix, the right product mix in terms of services, which you've mentioned earlier. But that will take me back to the same question. Are logistics leaders giving it the right amount of effort into actually developing their methodology, or they are still sticking to the old style?
The control towers that you've mentioned, or the back office people, maybe they're not always delivering the right image to the leaders and telling them, okay, if we try to work this or try to change that using, like you said, the routes as an example. No, I don't want to focus on this certain lane always because I can make money this lane. You're not asking people from management to know this. You need to have the people on ground that understands the business, that have the courage to go and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking is right, and this needs to be in a organized way that is backed up by numbers. Because most of the people, unfortunately, Shady, they do not, whenever they discuss, it's always a subjective discussion. We don't need to do this lane because this lane is on loss. Maybe it's on loss because you're using the wrong type of truck, because you're not focusing on the right product. Have you seen what is the main business from this lane to that lane? Maybe they are exporting a lot of copper from this lane to that lane. Copper is an expensive product, but you don't want to work on moving copper because you're afraid of theft. Okay, then I take, what are the measures that I can take on my truck in terms of visibility, like you said, and I know that the truck will move from point A to point B in 3 days. And these are the stops that I need to focus on. And these are the geofences that I need to put on. It's not just about tracking the truck, but because you don't want to move this kind of goods and you're afraid to move it, so you're not making money. No, it doesn't work this way.
I think the main answer is because they are working in silos, and I will have to actually go in depth a little bit in this point.
Please.
And I will mention the leaders, the finance people within the logistics, operation teams, and sales guys. These 4 are actually working in silos in logistics, and that is the main challenge when I talk about the logistics industry. And allow me to debate with you a little bit about this, because and that is the main reason why we became friends later, because we both understand the challenges within our businesses. And when I talk about automotive and logistics, they are a lot of people don't understand is that they are tightly working together every single day. And because automotive supplies trucks, logistics moves the goods for automotive, and it's like a marriage relation that people just don't understand. It's co-related big time.
Correct.
So back again to the silos. Now, I truly believe the silos that are working within the logistics are the main challenge in the logistics industry.
You're absolutely right. And it's not out of bad will. Finance will always look into cost. And
it's the same in automotive, by the way.
Exactly. Sales will always look to sell what they need to sell.
And what's easier.
What's easier for them. And they will not look into the cost. The operations guys, for them, is to move a shipment. I wouldn't say no matter what the cost is, but they're focusing on moving only the shipment.
They want less headaches.
Exactly. So you're absolutely right. Silos is an issue. And this is where leaders come in and try to make sure that everyone works side by side and to look into everyone's perspective. So I cannot ignore and tell the finance team as I'm managing a company. I cannot go to the finance team and say, listen, no matter what happens, you need to move these goods. It doesn't work this way, because if I do not look into cost, I'm dead. I cannot go to the operations guy and say, listen, you need to focus on cost. So he will divert all his movement. No, then I need to do it cheaper because I have a cost constraint. It doesn't work this way. But when people understand, and they need to understand the basics. Sales need to understand the basics of finance and how finance is thinking. Operations need to think the basics of sales. And they need to go and do these visits with sales. And I always encourage the operations team to be working side by side with the sales team. Sales team cannot go and overpromise to customers without understanding what's happening with operations, because then you're a dreamer. You're selling, and you know that, Shady, overselling, okay, or overpromising is really bad, because it's easy to get a customer on board, okay. It's very easy to lose a customer, and it's very difficult to get him back.
But that will get me to the human factor, because that's where it all moves around. Human factor, I would always look at the leaders, the people who work in the industry. And of course, at the end of the day, there is always the system which we are talking about. And when we say system, is basically the IT. But no system that can develop a business can succeed without the human factor.
Of course, absolutely right. You can have as much AI agents to put for you whatever strategy you want or how you work, but do they know Shady, who's the logistics manager in this company? Even if you get your AI recorder with you and I'm discussing with Shady and I put him, he will not understand. He will not have this feeling, the human feeling of, and this is where I do not agree with the statement that says AI will take over the human business or so. Of course, it will replace a lot, but this is where a person needs to be dynamic and agile and to think, okay, if I could be replaced by this AI agent, what can I learn? A new thing that will still make my human existence important as AI.
I mean, yeah, I would have to agree with you 100%.
You will never have an AI selling, huh?
No.
Correct?
No.
You can have an AI in a call center to answer a complaint or to take a complaint from a customer, but a human person, when he speaks to you over the phone, makes a huge difference. And we've seen a lot of these, Shady. Okay, when you have a car that breaks down and you speak to the service center, you can have an AI to take your complaint, but you still need the human interaction to speak to express, and this is something that will never go away.
And that is what I basically, at the end of our episode, I would really close this with these phrases. Logistics is never about just a transport function. It's business continuity, it is customer trust, it is working under pressure, and none of this is about the digital only. Yes, there are enablers within the systems, and whenever the supply chain is working perfectly, it's almost invisible.
Correct.
However, when things start to go sideways and you start to have issues, that is where the gaps or the defects within the process starts to rise.
Correct.
And again, back to the human factor. When there is a good communication built between the team members, everything can be solved in no time.
Right.
Well,
and with customers as well, right?
Definitely.
The communication with customers and internally.
And at the end, really, Chris, it was a pleasure having you on board. And I hope we shed light a little bit on some of the operations and some of the hidden stuff that people don't even see. But I really enjoyed our conversation today. And I'm sure even in the next coming episode, definitely we can have a couple of other points that people would love to hear about.
Sure. Thank you, Shady. It was a great pleasure, and I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.